Representative Ilhan Omar told Politico that she and other progressive lawmakers in the House are willing to withhold their vote on the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill unless there is a foolproof strategy in place to ensure that they can vote on a second reconciliation bill and get it signed by Biden simultaneously. Now remember, this is what Joe Biden had promised to do. He said, we're gonna do this bipartisan deal because we wanna get something done in a bipartisan way with these Republican lawmakers in the Senate, but we're also going to have a second bill that we will pass and sign in tandem, and we'll pass it through reconciliation, simple majority in the Senate, that has all of the things that Republicans stripped out. Now, I think that strategy was dumb. I think that strategy is unlikely to work unless progressives are willing to withhold their vote to ensure that these two bills pass in tandem. Now, Omar also, here's what her statement was, by the way. She told Politico, quote, "We have a commitment that regardless of what happens with bipartisan legislation, they will give us reconciliation legislation that goes as far as we've wanted it." And so the reconciliation bill is supposed to include all of the climate action related provisions that were stripped away by Republicans. It's also supposed to include funding for childcare and also funding for elder care. The human infrastructure components of the Biden plan that actually made it incredibly popular across the country, even in red states. I mean, upwards of 70% of Americans are in favor of Biden's initial infrastructure bill. So capitulating with Republicans is, in my opinion, a dumb move. Giving into the demands of a bought off politician like Senator Joe Manchin is a dumb move, it really is. But again, if progressives are really willing to follow through with what Representative Omar is saying here, there is a chance for a positive outcome. So Omar isn't the only Democrat who has said this in public. The linkage is non-negotiable for me, added Progressive Representative Richie Torres, who said the bipartisan compromise excluded his priorities like affordable housing. As a result, he added, "I will refuse to vote for any bill that fails to be linked to a larger reconciliation bill." The Progressive Caucus in the House actually did a poll. They have about 100 members in that caucus. We know that not all of them are actually progressive. But through that poll, they found that 60 out of 100 of those progressive lawmakers are willing to withhold their vote to ensure that there's a second reconciliation bill that passes in tandem. Now, Joe Manchin, Senator Joe Manchin, unironically, tried to argue during a recent interview on MSNBC that progressives, they might be unreasonable here. They might be super unreasonable. Let's hear what he had to say.
I would hope that everyone would look at this as something that we can do. It's doable in a bipartisan way. Take that victory, and then let's go. We know they're not going to go to the human infrastructure because of the adjustments of the tax code. I've known that from day one. But we can still go through the process, knowing we'll probably have to go to reconciliation, and then do what we can afford to do. Saying I'm going to not vote for the other one because you haven't guaranteed to vote for everything. We've never done legislation that way. I've never been a part of it in 10 years I've been in the Senate. So let's work the legislation the way it's going to be presented.
This is the guy who has threatened to block every piece of legislation in Biden's agenda if he doesn't get what he wants. He's been the one who's raised his hand over and over again to say, no, I really care about bipartisanship. I mean, my corporate donors paid me to pretend like I care about bipartisanship, so I'm gonna block these bills unless they're watered down. Remember, it was Manchin who persuaded the Biden administration to water down the coronavirus relief bill, and it was watered down. The unemployment benefits were watered down from $400 a week to $300 a week, and Manchin succeeded in implementing additional means testing so fewer Americans would qualify for the stimulus. So he did that arguing that he wanted to get Republicans on board. And how many Republicans voted for that bill? That's right, zero, none of them did. It wasn't really about bipartisanship. It was about ensuring that Americans didn't get the financial relief that they really needed, or at least lowering the amount of financial relief they would receive. in order to ensure that they'd be desperate enough to go back to their jobs that pay them a starvation wage. That's what this was really about. Let's not get it twisted. And as The Intercept reported, and as The Intercept obtained leaked audio of Manchin speaking to the so-called no labels group of billionaire donors, Manchin knows that bipartisanship isn't a reality. He knows that the Republican Party is full of obstructionists who have no interest in working together, but he wanted to provide cover for his lies, and so he encouraged these billionaire donors to offer some of these retiring Republican senators jobs once they're done with their term, so they can, sweeten the deal a little bit, and they can maybe vote in favor of a January 6th commission to investigate what happened in the Capitol. And that would somehow persuade the American people that all's well in the Senate. Lawmakers are working together, both Democrats and Republicans. They love each other, kumbaya. But like, the bipartisanship in Congress doesn't matter. What does matter is, how do the American people feel? And the majority of the American people, with Republicans included in this equation, were in favor of Biden's original infrastructure bill. I would argue that if you were to poll Americans right now, and if you were to ask them, hey, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer Biden's original infrastructure bill that had all of these wonderful components like childcare, elder care, climate action, or do you prefer the watered down bipartisan version that would privatize $100 billion worth of public infrastructure? I don't know, I might be wrong, but I would argue that most Americans, Republicans included, would probably enjoy Biden's provisions far more than this awful, watered down corporate giveaway that's now been agreed upon by the Biden administration and a bipartisan group of senators who, again, are looking out for their corporate donors. Now, I also want to just note that Manchin has not committed to voting to the reconciliation or voting for the reconciliation bill. Manchin has indicated that he would support the Democrats' second measure, which some have dubbed the human infrastructure bill, but noted, and this is important, but noted he hasn't agreed on the amount and needs to see what will be in the legislation. So he's like, that reconciliation bill, yeah, totally. Yes, I will vote for it, except if I have a problem with the funding for it, probably not. I'm probably not gonna vote for it. I don't know, let me check in with the no labels group of billionaire donors. Let me see what they think. By the way, no one in the mainstream press even covered that. That story by The Intercept, and shout outs to Ryan Grimm and Ken Klippenstein for reporting on that, I think was such a huge story because it helped Americans understand the inner workings of the Senate, of Congress, what motivates these lawmakers, and it got no attention. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Now, House Budget Committee Chair Representative John Yarmuth privately urged a group of senior Democrats not to draw public red lines for either of the bills, whether it's price tags or policy wishes. That's basically his way of saying to progressive lawmakers, hey, hush up, don't threaten us by saying you're gonna withhold your vote. But look, this is the time where we need to provide positive reinforcement to progressive lawmakers in the House because they do have leverage. They do have an opportunity to pass provisions from the infrastructure bill that are incredibly important and would, in fact, materially improve people's lives. They have nothing to fear if they stick together and withhold their votes and actually deliver for their constituents and the American people. The only people who should be scared are clowns like Senator Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. But if progressives actually fight on behalf of the American people, and it's abundantly clear that they're fighting to ensure that we're doing something about climate change, to ensure that we're doing something to compensate people who take care of elderly family members, that's work. They deserve compensation for that. If they fight for communities that have been neglected, that's your best shot at making your case for why the Democratic Party is better than the Republican Party. Give people what they want. They tell you what they want in the polls. Many of these progressive lawmakers don't take massive campaign donations from corporations. They don't take money from super PACs, and that should liberate them. Flex your power, flex your muscle. Why wouldn't you? What's the whole point of being in Congress in the first place? To go live in DC for 6 months out of the year? That sounds awful. Who wants to do that? No one. So do your jobs. And I'm not trying to be aggressive or negative toward them right now. It seems like they have the right idea. The question is, will they execute it? And if they do, I promise you, it'll work out well. They'll get negative press coverage. I'm sure they'll get pushback from the Democratic establishment and Democratic leadership. Who cares? These are people who are incredibly unpopular because they don't deliver. So if progressives do deliver, then we'll feel pretty good about putting them in Congress in the first place.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.